The Arizona twilight bled slowly into the horizon, a bruised mixture of violet and dying gold. And Clara Noland stood alone on her porch as she had done every evening since her husband's passing, listening to the restless hum of the desert that had become both her companion and her tormentor. The boards under her boots creaked softly as she shifted her weight, drawing her shawl closer around her shoulders, as a whisper of cold air swept across the barren yard, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and distant rain. She glanced across the fields, their soil cracked and exhausted from a season too harsh and a life too heavy, and she wondered, as she often did, how much longer she could keep this farm alive. The lantern hanging beside her flickered in protest against the wind, its dim glow struggling to hold back the gathering darkness. Nights were the hardest. Nights reminded her of what she'd lost 2 winters before. Fever had taken Samuel from her with a cruelty that still caught her breath when she thought too long about it. She could still picture the way his hand felt in hers during his final hours, once strong enough to lift hay bales with ease, now trembling and fragile like a dying leaf. She had buried him on the hill overlooking the ranch, marking the grave with a stone he had carved there, initials into when they first arrived. In this lonely stretch of land, he had chosen it as their home because he believed the open sky made a person feel free. Clara had agreed then. Now the same sky made her feel unbearably small. The world had grown quieter without him, as if even the wind mourned his absence. She exhaled slowly, trying to calm the tightness in her chest, when suddenly the ground trembled beneath her feet, not violently, not enough to send her running, but enough to make her heart trip. Hoofbeats, heavy, uneven, strained. The sound was wrong. Not the rhythmic gallop of a rider with purpose, but the dragging, desperate thud of someone who had no strength left. Clara straightened, scanning the darkness. Her first instinct was fear of thieves, of outlaws, of men who roamed the frontier with no law except the one they carved with bullets. Her second instinct, drilled into her by neighbors and reinforced by town gossip, whispered something else: Apache. The settlers lived with stories of raids, stolen horses, arrows in the night. Stories, Clara always suspected, that held more fear than truth. But a lone rider was a different matter. A single man could be anything: dangerous, dying, or both. She stepped back into the house, grabbed the rifle Samuel had kept above the door, and held it tightly as she returned to the porch. The hoofbeats grew louder, each one sending a tremor through the wooden planks beneath her. The lantern swung violently in the wind as the rider emerged from the darkness. Clara's breath froze in her throat. The horse, an Appaloosa coated in dust and sweat, staggered beneath the weight of its rider, who slumped forward as though only sheer stubbornness kept him in the saddle. The man lifted his head slightly, and the lantern's glow revealed his face, harshly cut features, long dark hair tangled with blood, and a jagged scar running from the edge of his brow down to his jaw like a lightning strike etched into flesh. His chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths, and the buckskin shirt he wore was torn open, revealing wounds that looked fresh enough to still burn. Apache. Clara knew it instantly, not from the stories, but from the quiet dignity in his posture, the hand-painted beads on the reins, the ceremonial patterns faintly visible on what remained of his clothing. Despite everything she had been taught to fear, Clara felt a crushing wave of something else: compassion, unexpected and overwhelming. The warrior's grip loosened on the saddle horn, and he fell. His body hit the dry dirt with a sound that made Clara flinch. For a moment, neither moved. The horse lowered its head, nudging the man gently as if urging him to rise. When he didn't, the animal turned its dark eyes toward Clara, and in that haunting, wordless way animals have, it seemed to plead with her. Clara swallowed hard. Her pulse raced, but she lowered the rifle. This wasn't a threat. This was a dying man. She rushed down the steps and knelt beside him, noticing the heat radiating from his skin, feverish, burning, dangerous. Blood seeped from a wound near his ribs, dark and sticky. His breathing rattled like old paper. "Sir, can you hear me?" Clara whispered, unsure if he even understood English. The warrior's eyes fluttered open, and for a fleeting moment, She saw fire in them, unyielding, proud, defiant even in agony. But then the fire dimmed, replaced by confusion and exhaustion. "Water," he rasped. Clara hesitated only a second before sprinting inside, filling a cup at the wash basin, and returning quickly. She helped him drink, her hand trembling as she steadied his head. He swallowed with effort, then sank back into the dirt, chest heaving. The desert night grew colder by the second, and Clara knew he wouldn't survive long out here. She glanced back at the house, at the empty bed waiting inside, a bed she had slept in alone for far too long. To bring him inside was unthinkable by the town's standards, but leaving him outside was unthinkable by hers. "All right," she whispered, half to him, half to herself. "Come on. Stay with me." It took nearly everything. She had to drag him toward the porch and through the doorway, his weight far heavier than her small frame should have been able to manage. Several times she stopped to catch her breath, her muscles trembling, sweat beading on her brow. But each time, she reminded herself, what kind of person would I be if I let him die? With one last heave, she pulled him onto the bed. Her bed. The only bed in the house. She set the rifle aside, lit another lamp, and assessed the damage. The wounds were ugly, cuts likely from knives, a gash from a bullet or a poorly made trap, bruises darkening like storm clouds beneath his skin. Clara fetched her sewing kit, boiled water, tore strips from an old shirt, and did what little she knew from tending Samuel through his fever. As she worked, the warrior drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring words in Apache that Clara couldn't understand but felt the ache of nonetheless. "You're safe," she whispered, not knowing why she needed him to hear it. "I'm helping you. Stay with me." Hours passed. The night deepened. Coyotes howled. The lamp hissed quietly. Clara stitched wounds with clumsy but determined hands, praying silently with every tug of the needle. When his fever spiked, she placed cool cloths on his forehead. When his breathing quickened, she whispered to him softly until it steadied again. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. Not while a life balanced so precariously under her roof. Dawn finally crept into the room, painting the wall with soft gold. The warrior stirred, his eyes slowly opening. Clara leaned forward, startled yet hopeful. His gaze met hers, dark, sharp, weary. "Why?" he whispered, voice rough like gravel. Clara studied him for a long moment, searching for the right words, then answered simply, "Because you needed help." He blinked, confusion flickering across his face. "You fear me." She didn't deny it. "Yes," she said, "but I fear what I'd become if I turned away more." For a long moment, he lay silent, eyes locked with hers, something unspoken passing between them, respect, maybe, or disbelief, or a fragile thread of trust forming in the morning light. Finally, he spoke. "Coda," he said quietly, touching his chest. "My name is Coda." Clara nodded. "I'm Clara." The warrior closed his eyes again, but not in fear, in relief. And that was the moment Clara realized her life was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine.